get a chair. We don't have to stand up here. So this is a short session. It's only 30 minutes. So to make this as relevant as possible to all of you, this whole presentation is going to focus on the audience and not up here. So what we're going to do is put up a couple of slides about some topics that are relevant to towers and antennas, feed lines, and I would encourage you to take a look at the briefing. Anybody have it open to that page? 161. Page 161. Okay. Yeah. So this presentation begins on page 161. There's nowhere near enough time to go through all these slides. And it runs through page 171. So while I'm presenting a few selected slides, if you have any questions about any of the other 10 pages, feel free to ask those questions, and we'll be very pleased to identify those or to respond to those. So why is this an important topic? Well, look where we are. Nobody expected this incredible second peak of this sunspot cycle 24. Last year, we were all kind of in the doldrums. We had this nice peak in November 2011. 2012 was kind of disappointing. 2013 was worse. So things were looking pretty bad. And wow, this last contest season has been absolutely amazing. So it's important that our antenna systems be ready to help enjoy this. And 2015, this is from my favorite long-term propagation site, or solar prediction site, the NASA site. There's the web address right there. 2015 is forecast to be a little bit worse than this year, but not a whole lot. So we've got another season ahead. So any effort you make to improve or maintain your antenna system, including the feed lines and especially the connectors, boy, they're a constant source of problems. I think you've heard that enough today. But you probably, if you haven't had the problems yourself, you probably know people who've had antenna problems that turned out to be a bad connector, usually bad installation. So there's ample motivation for us to do something. So let me just briefly mention this topic. In terms of improving a station, many contesters, once they get interested in building a competitive station, start kind of right here. 50 or 60 foot tower and a small rotator, maybe a small tri-bander, some dipoles, and so on. This is a pretty effective station. And in terms of significantly improving on that, the real problem with this station is that the tower is a little bit short for serious DXing. So the next level of improvement here is maybe kind of this level. You could either make that tower taller or replace it. And this is a relatively cost-effective 40-meter antenna. It doesn't require a massive rotator. Many hams use it, have had great success. So this is an achievable upgrade for a system like this for a cost that's not going to break the bank. The cost of this system is about the same as the cost of a very good transceiver. And if you really want to improve significantly on this, it's a pretty high cost thing to go from this step to the next one. Usually a tower 100 feet higher or higher if you can, and monobanders. So it's a good time to ask for any questions about this topic, about how do I improve my antenna system. Is anybody at this level? 50-foot towers? Have you thought about how you might improve your station? Question in the back.
Actually, it's common. I run real low loss Coax and good connectors. That helps. That makes a big difference right there on a smaller tower.
Well, you know, your experience is not alone. I mean, people have invested countless thousands of dollars in antennas, put up their transmission lines, and then forgot about the whole system and just assumed that all the expense and trouble they went to install it was just going to continue to perform as new for an indefinite number of years out into the future. And of course, it's absolutely false. And connectors are one of the big problems. All the way in the back of the room. Go ahead.
So you got nothing up there now at all?
Nothing. I have a dipole at 37 feet. CTU holds a dipole at 37 feet. And I have a 100-watt Yaesu box. I got 2,000.
So on this chart, you're kind of up here somewhere.
Yeah, pretty much. As Grandpa would say, something like
I would think you'd want to consider putting up as big a tri-bander as you probably could. If contesting is your focus, that's what you're going to need.
What kind of a mast do you have?
Right now, it's an MFJ push up at 37 feet. And I'm replacing it with a tower. I have a Universal Towers 40 foot with a, I think it's a 20 foot piece of aluminum pipe in the mast to raise it 40 to 50 feet up. It's laying in my backyard. This is my Icom.
That's not going. I'll bet it's not doing any good for your signal at all to have that laying in the backyard. So the first step is to install it.
Yes, next month.
So try to do this. There's your answer right here. Do a small tri-bander or a hex beam or a quad. Do as close as you can to that with your 40-foot tower. Any other questions?
There's somebody here.
If you want to talk about that in more detail, come find me tonight. Okay? We've only got 30 minutes, so we can't get into lots of really low-level discussions. I'd love to do it, but we can't. Over here.
I have a G4S with the Adam for the 40. And I'm going up with the dipole for the 4080. Right with my G4S or with it on the 90 degrees.
The antenna that you have, the one you're asking the question about, is that a 40-meter beam?
No, but had
the tri-bander. I think the only area where you might run into trouble with interaction is the third harmonic relationship between 15 meters and 40. Other than that, I don't think there's any issues.
No,
Right. So, will it be rotatable as well? The 40-meter dipole will be rotatable? Oh, it's an add-on.
Oh, that shouldn't be any problem at all.
No.
Oh, go for it. It'll work fine. Yeah, you'll enjoy it. That's a little bit of a compromise antenna on 40, but it's not bad. I think it'll work fine. Any other questions? All the way in the back here.
I think if you can put the 40-meter beam up, that would be my preference. At 90 feet, that should work gangbusters.
Yep, that's. So let me comment a little more broadly on the topic. Once you get above 160 meters, so we're talking about 80, 40 meters and above, horizontal polarization, if you can get decent height, and on 40 meters, 90 feet is a great height for 40 meters. It's almost ideal. So a horizontally polarized antenna is going to get the full benefit of the 6 dB ground reflection that you get for free with a horizontally polarized antenna. Unless your verticals are going to be built on the edge of the ocean or in a salt swamp, they're going to get a couple of dB of ground reflection at best. So you're talking about a really high performance antenna with that 2-element vertical at 90 feet versus a 2-element horizontal 40-meter beam at 90 feet versus a 2-element vertical that's going to be struggling. There's going to be a huge difference in signal level between those two, unless you move to the ocean.
I think one of the nice things you'll get though out of the two verticals, you got instant direction switching, which is pretty nice, which you won't get with the rotatable Yagi.
Right here.
Do you have any comments on the WRTC tri-band
got to be honest with you, I don't really know a whole lot about it. I think it's probably effectively 2, possibly 3 elements per band, 2 on 20.
I know about the public performance, right?
Well, if you think about the guys who are involved in WRTC organization and how seriously they've gone about evaluating the performance of the stations involved, those guys deserve our trust. And if they're banking on the performance of that antenna for their WRTC stations, I would bet that they're right. That they've got a very good antenna.
I know that in the early going they evaluated several options, and that this one was clearly their best choice.
Yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about using it. Any other questions? Right here.
I can tell you when you're contesting in May and through the summer, the quad is an awful nice antenna to have because of the lack of or the immunity to precipitation static. But I mean, you've got winter to consider. That thing's got to stay up, so there's mechanical issues. But electrically, the quad to me is quite attractive. You can keep it up there.
I've got a 2-element quad on 80 and it stays up there for the last 25 years.
That's different.
What's the problem? But of course, John has put his finger on exactly the issue, and that is the mechanical part. If you have a tower that allows you to easy access to that antenna to make repairs, go for it. But if maintaining the quad is going to be a problem for you, maybe that's the dominant factor in your selection rather than performance. You can definitely put up a Yagi done properly that you can put up, and you shouldn't have trouble with it for 30 years. There isn't a quad that I know of where you can do the same thing. Well, if you can live with the consequences of that, then go for it. So I mean, you have to decide mechanically whether maintenance, quads require maintenance. Period. Quads require maintenance, and if that's going to be a big headache for you, that's not your antenna. If you can live with that, you'll have good success with it. Only you know the answer to that question. I can't possibly know. Yeah.
I noticed on all 3 of your scenarios here, you list a 160 meter inverted L. Other than, say, a full quarter wave tower with 120 radials, which is something I'm not going to manage. Other than the inverted L, what sort of options do you think make good sense for transmit?
I think it's the vertical polarization that you're trying to get.
Right. We're talking about 160 here, right?
Yeah. Okay. And if you don't have that much height to play with, I think the inverted L is a logical solution.
Make as much vertical as you can.
Yeah.
Okay? Even 30 feet.
It's not right there in the middle. About an 80-foot tower.
So you could put up an inverted L supported by that tower with the vertical part maybe 60 feet high.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fine inverted L.
Right now I'm using a they call it folded umbrella.
Yeah.
Wires coming down like that, and then I'm feeding with a matchbox. I think I can probably do that.
Yeah. I think you'll be happy with an inverted L. You've got plenty of space for it. I mean, you started out suggesting you didn't have enough space, and then you describe kind of an ideal environment for it. So
you'll need the radials, though. It's being vertical radiator.
You need radials, yeah. Otherwise, you'll just heat the earthworms.
Right.
Yes. What kind of antenna is the 2-element 40? Full size? So it has 46-foot elements or something like that? And you're going to turn... That is on what kind of wind and ice conditions do you have in your area? Okay. You have a hurricane, you're not going to have that rotator anymore.
Or the antenna.
Or maybe the antenna, but maybe that's normal. Yeah. The antenna system you've described mechanically is at the marginal edge of what that Orion rotator is capable of doing. Well, you have to decide, if the Orion is probably fine for all but the most extreme conditions, so maybe you're willing to say, okay, I'll replace it. Or you can get that Orion rotator repaired no matter what's wrong with it for about $300. So the next step up in rotator is like $2,000. Well, the Orion, I guess now is pretty close to that anyway. So the next step up is a big step. So that's a 4-element step IR. This is a guide tower. So where are the guy levels? And how high are they? Yeah, so the choices are kind of 35, 70, 100, or the top, right? Go for it is what I would say. Yeah, I think that's the obvious choice. And you're going to turn it with what kind of a rotator? Yeah. I'll tell you what I would consider doing is instead of using an Orion, which is going to be marginal for that 40-meter beam, I would consider putting another tick ring at the top, which will not be marginal for the 40-meter antenna. 2 is better, but probably not necessary. With that tick ring, you could put 1, 2, or 3 motors on it.
What's a tick ring go for these days? That's not a cheap proposition either, though.
It's about the same as the Orion, I think. Yeah. Same price category, more or less. It's not far different, and it's much stronger.
I don't think there's a set formula for that. I've seen them as close as 3 feet, 4 feet in that range. I think it's probably a circumstantial thing in terms of how much energy is going to couple to the tower. Is my guess. You might have to do a little bit of experimentation, but I've seen 3-4 feet work just fine.
Yeah, and inevitably the tower becomes part of the system. I agree with John. Short, relatively small spacing should work fine. In the back?
Yeah, what's your preferred waterproofing methods?
Let me go to a different slide.
And I think I've already seen his slide, and I think you're going to find that he and I are in total agreement on exactly what products to use when he gets the slide up. It's
That's a really good question. It's a good opportunity to transition to a slightly different topic.
I think you just passed it.
There. Okay, you know about this, John. Tell them about it.
All right, the tape that does the work, does the actual waterproofing, is the tape on the C130, the 130C rather. That's a butyl rubber tape that you apply, you stretch it, and you overlap. And that tape, after half an hour of being on top of itself, as it were, you can't pull that thing apart. It almost vulcanizes, okay? The problem with that tape by itself is that it's not UV resistant. So you need to put something to keep it protected from the sun, and that's where a good quality vinyl tape like the Scotch 88, I think he's got there. 33, yeah, that's just as good. That's just to protect from the sun to make sure you get longevity out of the 130C tape. That is, I think, the best solution, and it's easy to apply.
So, folks, I think we've just about run out of time, but I'm just going to show one more slide. See if I can find it. There it is. Does anybody have a feed point that looks like this, where it's absolutely impossible for water to get into the feed line? Does anybody have something like that? I have that antenna. Yes. You do? Good. Everybody in this room should take a look at this slide. This is the most vulnerable place for water to get into your transmission line. And all it takes is to wrap the transmission line right up to the solder lines, all the way up there, and encapsulate that in Scotch 130C, and then use Scotch 33 to protect it. And then the bolts that fasten the feed line to the antenna itself should be substantial stainless steel screws with nylon insert, stainless steel lock nuts, so the nuts cannot come undone. And the coax should be very firmly fastened to the boom, so there's no possibility of any vibration happening right here. This is what the feed point on every one of your antennas should look like. So water cannot possibly get in. So I think we're done. Thanks for all your questions, guys.